In the second cam clip for the cell, we're going to look at organelles. And you recall that when we were looking at the levels of organization in the introduction portion to this course, we talked about organelles. And organelles, I said at the time, were these tiny little working parts that are inside the cell. So if you think of the cell kind of like a factory, and inside the cell are these structures, and there's lots of them. Now, we're not going to look at all of them. We're going to look at the one that pertain most to what we need to know here, and see what they do for us. So I'm just going to go to the picture to work from the picture here. Okay, so the first one we want to talk about are ribosomes. And ribosomes you'll find are a number of places, okay? They're either free floating, like these little dots in the cytoplasm, or stuck to the endoplasmic reticulum. What's important about them is protein synthesis. Now, when we talk about protein synthesis, this is where we build our body proteins. This is sort of like the area that they get built on in the cell. So depending on what kind of a cell you have, if you have a muscle cell, you're going to build muscle proteins. If you have a skin cell, you're going to build some skin proteins. And we'll talk about proteins all throughout the program. And when we talk about them, we'll always think back to the ribosomes is where they're built. The other thing that we will talk about here are what we call the centrioles. Now, this is not the best picture, but here they are here. And if you follow this along, right here. And what they are is like these tubular structures that kind of lay at right angles to each other like that. And so this rod-shaped bodies, and they're very close to the nucleus. You can see the location of them right here, okay? And what happens when the cell divides is that the centrioles separate and go to opposite sides of the cell and pull the cell throughout cell division. Now, one of I'd say the last 10 years or more, maybe a little bit more, cancer therapy has come a long way because they found a way to kill the centrioles in a cancer cell, and if they kill the centrioles, then the cell can't divide. So it's been a great discovery. The other thing we want to talk about are lysosomes. So lysosomes, you may not be able to see them here, okay, but locate them in your textbook as well. And what they are these kind of like little membranous sacs that float all inside here. And I always refer them as suicide sacs because what they do is they contain these enzymes and they bust open and they clean up that part of the cell. So they really function to keep the cell happy and healthy. The mitochondria, depending on what kind of a cell it is, there's going to be lots of mitochondria. Okay, so see this yellow here and over here. And we often give them the term the powerhouse of the cell. Sort of these sausage-like bodies that have a lot of little divisions inside them, and they move around the cytoplasm. Sometimes they have lots, sometimes the cell will have many, and sometimes it won't have very many. And they can divide if they need to. Inside of them is the number of enzymes, and that's where we make ATP. That's the second stage of ATP happens in the mitochondria. Okay. So when we talk about ATP, we'll come back and talk a lot about the mitochondria. We talked about lysosomes, we talked about the mitochondria. And again, this is just a photograph, if you will, and this is an example of looking down at the centriole, okay? And they lay at right angles to each other somewhere near the nucleus. This picture here gives you a little bit more of a close-up picture, and you can see the ribosomes here and the ribosomes here, okay? You can see from this picture that there's quite a skeletal structure holding the cell together, and I always marvel at this because, we can't even see it with our naked eye. And there's a big mitochondria right there. Okay, so, and again, just more of an artist's rendition of it. And when we make ATP, the first part of ATP, the production of energies, happens in the cytoplasm, and the second part goes into the mitochondria. And that's the end of cam clip number 2.